It is a story of how the United States went from being the richest country on earth to spending more on interest payments than on defense in a year. In November 2024, U.S. Treasury bonds exceeded $36 trillion, and Washington will increase by another $1 trillion every 100 days at current interest rates. Today, we're going to analyze just how bad this is, who is sounding alarms inside the system, whether doomsday headlines hold up, and whether the truth is more chaotic than that. Let's start with that number, which should prevent you from catching a cold. By the end of 2024, debt exceeded $36 trillion, and the proportion of debt in GDP climbed to between 121% and 124%. In a year of economic activity, China's debt outstripped production. That is what most people miss. The last time the United States approached that level was in 1946, just after World War II, when debt to GDP peaked at about 119%, meaning that peacetime America is now in a truly unknown position. Total debt is not even the scariest part. Interest is. In fiscal year 2024, the federal government spent only more than $880 billion in net interest, not principal, to cover the cost of debt owed. For the first time in modern history, interest payments exceed the total defense budget, meaning the United States now spends more on rent than on the military. The Congressional Budget Office expects net interest rates to exceed $1 TN a year by 2025 or 2026, a surge attributed to interest rates. In 2021, the average interest rate of U.S. Treasury bonds was close to 1.6%, and by the end of 2024, it had more than doubled to about 3.3%. When you owe $36 trillion, every DD is hundreds of billions more. How the country got here. In short, none of this happened overnight. As early as the Reagan administration in 1981, U.S. Treasury bonds exceeded $1 trillion for the first time. And by the time of the 2008 financial crisis, the number had climbed to about $10 trillion. After the introduction of the market rescue measures, the COVID-19 epidemic reappeared, with debt jumping from about $23 trillion to $28 trillion between 2020 and 2021 alone. The March 2020 CARE Act itself, costing $2.2 trillion, is just one of several overlapping relief programs. From there, the climb is almost vertical. Debt exceeded 33 trillion yuan in August 2023, 34 trillion yuan in January 2024, 35 trillion yuan in July, and 36 trillion yuan in November. Each trillion yuan increase is faster than the previous one. Credit markets must have noticed. In August 2011, Standard & Poor's downgraded the United States from AAA to AA+ for the first time. And in August 2023, Fitch did the same, citing fiscal deterioration and repeated debt ceiling standoffs. A few months later, in November 2023, Moody's downgraded the U.S. credit outlook from stable to negative, meaning that the three major rating agencies are now flashing yellow in the same country. Once considered the world's safest borrower, that is where Wall Street's warnings are really loud. Jamie Dimon, chief executive of JPMorgan Chase, told Sky News in early 2024 that this is a cliff. And in about 10 years, we will move towards it at 60 miles per HR to end the quotation. The account is not anonymous on social media, but the head of China's largest bank is talking publicly about it. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said in an interview with 60 Minutes in February 2024 that the federal government is on an unsustainable fiscal path, which only means that debt growth is faster than economic growth. when the Fed chairman used the word unsustainable on national television, things were no longer normal. Here are some details about running out of time. Philip Swagel, director of the Congressional Budget Office, warned the Financial Times in March 2024 that the U.S. fiscal path could trigger a market reaction similar to the Leeds Trust moment in 2022, when the bond market largely rejected the UK government spending plan within days. This is the head of the Congressional Budget Office, who has publicly compared the trajectory of the United States to the bond market crisis that has already occurred. Let's talk about who really owns this pile, because that is where geopolitics gets interesting. About $8.5 trillion of American debt is in foreign hands, with Japan as the largest holder at about $1.1 trillion, Britain at about $750 billion, and then China as early as 2013. Beijing's holdings of more than $1.3 trillion in treasury bonds had fallen to about $770 billion. For more than a decade, China has quietly reduced its holdings of American debt, which is what the word de-dollarization means. Before you panic and start buying gold and canned beans, let's step on the brakes and look at each other, because there is a real side. Not all economists believe the sky is falling. Stephanie Kelton, one of the main voices behind modern monetary theory, believes that countries that issue money can actually fail like households or businesses, and that the real constraint in her framework is inflation, not the debt numbers themselves. Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate in economics, has argued for years that the debt panic was overblown, even as he acknowledged that rising interest rates would revolutionize mathematics. Another real example is that the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency gives what American economists call excessive privileges, which basically means that the world needs dollars. So even if the fundamentals look ugly, the world continues to buy American debt. The reality may be somewhere in between. America won't wake up tomorrow morning unable to pay its bills, but trajectory is the real problem. The Congressional Budget Office predicts that under current law, federal debt held by the public will reach 166% of GDP by 2054, and the Social Security and Medicare trustees reported in May 2024 that the Social Security Retirement Trust will be exhausted in 2033, followed by the Medicare Hospital Insurance Fund in 2036. Fatigue doesn't mean zero. That means benefits will be automatically cut to cover any upcoming payroll tax, which is equivalent to about 77% of the planned Social Security payment, which will directly affect you if you watch under the age of 50. That is why the whole thing is politically insoluble. Mandatory spending, which means Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on debt, now accounts for most of the federal budget and exceeds defense spending. When politicians debate spending cuts, they often fight for parts of the budget that don't really drive the problem, because the actual drivers, benefits, are in the political radiation zone. Cut Social Security and end your career. Debt defaults remain unthinkable. Raising taxes to cover the nearly $2 trillion annual deficit is also unrealistic. By the way, the deficit in fiscal year 2024 reached about 1.83 trillion yuan, compared with about 1.7 trillion yuan in the previous year, none of which occurred during the recession. That is how Washington works in a relatively normal economy. Is the American economy really doomed? To be honest, no. This is not the drama of tomorrow's YouTube thumbnail crash. China still has the world's reserve currency, runs the deepest capital markets on Earth, and remains the most creative economy on Earth. But that doesn't mean good. When the chairman of the Federal Reserve, the chairman of the Congressional Budget Office, the chief executive of J.P. Morgan Chase, and the three major credit rating agencies are all reaching out for words such as unsustainability, cliff, and negative outlook. This is not background noise, but a signal worth taking seriously. That is the bottom line. America will not go bankrupt. China is slowly moving from an affordable country to one that must choose between interest payments and infrastructure, benefits and defense, tax increases and benefit cuts. The calculation of $36 trillion in debt and $880 billion in annual interest doesn't care who gets into the White House. And Jamie Dimon's description of the cliff is not a sudden decline, but a long, slow test. With more taxes redistributed to bondholders each year, rather than doing anything good for the country. That is the real story behind the debt numbers. It is not the end of the world. It is not collapse. It is just a country that quietly loses leeway. And few in Washington are willing to talk about it. Honestly, if this helps you understand the headline, click the like button to subscribe. And tell me which part of the comment surprised you the most. See you next time.